The Soviet MiG-29 was a very agile, very capable fighter aircraft designed by McDonnell specifically to counter new U.S. fighter planes like the McDonnell Douglas F-15 Eagle and the General Dynamics F-16 Falcon. Deployed into the Soviet Air Force in 1983, it was also sold to India, Libya, East Germany, and other Soviet allies, including Iraq. By 1990 and the invasion of Kuwait, the Iraqi Air Force had 39 MiG-29s. Captain John J.B. Kelk was an F-15 pilot in the 33 Tactical Fighter Wing based at Elgin Air Force Base in Florida. On August 28, 1990, his fighter wing was deployed to Saudi Arabia and began training for the war that might or might not come. On January 15, 1991, Iraqi forces still occupied Kuwait. On the 16th, Kelk's fighter wing learned that the airstrikes would begin on the following day. JB's interest in aviation started early. At age 3 or 4, he was already pestering his parents to take him to the airport at Eau Claire, Wisconsin, to watch the airplanes take off and land.
Fast forward then to high school, I started I got my first part-time job as a janitor in a auto body shop, working for Mr. Tom Kiwan. Great role model and working hard. But he was also flying, and I said, "Oh, well, I've always had an interest in that." And so between the income that I would earn from there, then I had enough where I could actually begin flying lessons, and so I did. And so I approached Mr. Darrell Gibson, who's, by the way, a Wisconsin Aviation Hall of Famer himself. I approached him and I said, "Hey, I would like to work for you." And so he hired me to work the flight line. Okay. At the time, we were also interested in flying. And so for me, that gave me a break on the flying lessons and the cost of the airplane.
JB learned to fly, adding ratings until becoming a certified flight instructor during college.
That was in the late 70s, early 80s, and general aviation was really slowing down during that time. And I was about to graduate in a couple of months, and right there on the front page of the Wall Street Journal was an article that said the Air Force is short 2,000 pilots. And so I literally clipped that article out of the student news from the student library, took it to the recruiter, my local Air Force recruiter, laid it on his desk, and I said, "Is that true?" 3 months later, I had short hair and I was learning how to salute.
He graduated at the top of his class of 50, and he was the only one chosen to fly the F-15 fighter jet.
We had a Air Force Day where they flew in different types of airplanes, including an F-15 and F-16. And I took a look at that F-15 on the flight ramp, and I thought that was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And I ended up putting in for an F-15 on my dream sheet, and was lucky enough that I did get it.
In Iraq in 1991, the airstrikes began in the early hours of January 17th. It was a surprise attack targeting the capital and Scud missile sites. The F-15s would follow the first wave of F-17 stealth bombers to destroy any enemy planes and clear a path for the second wave of bombers. Kelk, in a flight of 4 F-15Cs, crossed the border into Iraq just after 3 a.m.
Number one is we trained at night where most of our adversaries do not. So we felt we owned the night. So as we swept in high, 30,000 feet, and my particular engagement, we found each other on radar roughly the same time. And so I could tell someone was locked to me, and I was locked to this guy, and then employed my weapons, taking advantage of the greater speed and altitude up high that I had. So approximated 20-mile missile shot, if you will, and then maneuvered away. We dropped chaff, which is designed to defeat the enemy radar, and I did that. Turned back in, and then saw the fireball.
He learned that the enemy aircraft he had destroyed was a MiG-29, and the first MiG-29 ever shot down in combat.
And at that time, we were flying a lot. So I went back to the hooch and maybe tossed and turned for a few hours and came back in for my next flight. I remember the squadron commander, I says, I'm going to change this. I've replayed this engagement in my head over and over and over again. And I know the timing. I'm going to confirm it. And he looked at me, he says, you can't do that. What do you mean I can't do that? I know what I saw. He says, no, AWACS already confirmed it for you. So
Kelk retired in 2019 as a Major General with a total of 38 years of military service. Back in 2006, John Kelk became the first pilot to log more than 4,000 hours flying F-15s. Few F-15 pilots ever reached 2,000 hours in the Eagle. In an interview, Kelk said that the 4,000-hour milestone was nice to reflect on, but he said, you cross it and then look at your next flight, because you're only as good as your last sortie. Kelk also had a 32-year airline career at American Airlines. American, in particular, had a friendly military absence policy, granting him ample time off and flexibility to continue his F-15 flying career, along with various staff positions, all while flying an airline schedule. Quote, it wasn't always easy. Some months I would work a combined 25-plus days, but American Airlines and my supportive wife, Michelle, allowed me that dual career opportunity.
Good morning. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Mike Vaccaro, Air Force, retired, and I'm at Oshkosh, standing in front of a MiG-29 with Bill Gaius, who's the director down here and runs the Warbirds flight line, and he asked me to come out and talk about some experiences I've had flying with MiG-29s, not in MiG-29s, but in the Air Force, I was very fortunate, and I flew F-15Cs, and I spent the last part of my career down on the Gulf Coast of Florida in operational test and evaluation, and we had a really unique opportunity in the late 90s to fly with some former East German MiG-29s. The German Air Force kept one squadron of MiG-29s after reunification for a period of time that we used for dissimilar combat training, both in the United States and over in Europe. And Bill just asked me to talk a little bit about what it's like to fly against a MiG-29. So I've had a couple of opportunities to do what is probably the most fun thing we get to do in the fighter community, and that's what we call basic fighter maneuvers, or 1v1 maneuvering. And had a couple opportunities to go out in the Gulf range with the MiG-29 and dogfight. And I was flying an F-15C at the time, even with the Dash 220 engines. And the MiG-29 is a fantastic little energy machine for a fourth generation fighter. Which means it can turn really, really well. So it's an awful lot of fun to dogfight against. When I was a lieutenant back in the 80s, this was the primary adversary, and it's really unique to get to watch them at the air show. If you have an opportunity, when you get to watch a fourth generation airplane like this fly, and then at the same demonstration, you get to see a fifth generation airplane fly like a F-22 or an F-35. Becomes immediately apparent, even just standing on the ground, how much more energy the fifth generation fighters are able to generate. So airplanes like the F-15 and the F-16 and the MiG-29 and its partner in crime, the Su-27, are all good airplanes, but they're pretty significantly outclassed by anything that's in the fifth generation right now. However, it still presents a great opportunity for training against an adversary aircraft that you may run into in a little bit lower tech war. And certainly what's happening with Russia and Ukraine, I believe the MiG-29s are the primary fighters the Ukrainians are flying. The airplanes are still around. So it's just a neat airplane, and it's absolutely cool that folks like these can pull this together and bring a jet like this up to Oshkosh, so us folks can actually still experience it out in the wild.
For our next inductee, he was quoted as saying once, "There's nothing else like it." That's JB's response when he was asked to explain the experience of piloting an F-15 Eagle fighter jet in peacetime or in combat. There's every emotion, he explained, every element of excitement and intrigue. In combat, though, multiply that times 10. As you're about to see, John J.B. Kelk's lifetime in the air can easily be explained the same way. from record victories to record hours to 2 dual full-time careers spanning more than 30 years each. There's just simply nothing else like it.
America's future will be determined by your dreams and your visions.
For some of you will travel where no man has ever traveled before. Some of you will fly the fastest planes that have ever been built, reach the highest altitude that man has ever gone to.
Whether you serve in the skies above or on the ground below, each of you has stepped forward to defend your country.
The American people support you. They are counting on you, and they believe you truly do represent the best of America.
Ready? Ready. Go.
The F-15 can fly 3 times as fast as a 747 passenger jet. Its massive engines generate over 50,000 pounds of thrust.
Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome retired American Airlines Captain, Air Force Major General John J.B. Kelk.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kurt. Can everyone hear me okay, I hope? Thank you, Kurt, for those overly kind and generous remarks, and Scott for the video. I really appreciate all those. Always strange seeing yourself in one of those. To anyone who's been filmed before, I think you can relate. What I would like to do is kind of channel my comments. You know, if you look at the banner, it says Wisconsin Aviation Hall of Fame. I want to focus on the first 2 letters, Wisconsin Aviation. The HF piece hasn't quite sunk in yet, so let me tie my remarks to that. And let me first begin by saying how unbelievably proud I am to be from Wisconsin, born and raised and educated in this state. Cheeseheads unite. I can think of no other place that the people have the values, the hard work ethic, and the true, genuine spirit of one-on-one engagement. A yes means yes and no means no. We can still smile while we do it. And it's always a pleasure to be up in this state. So I cannot thank my heritage growing up. And I do believe that is a foundation that those of us from this state can take and go around and export to, and that leads to success. And you'll hear me talk about that. So that's Wisconsin, number 1. Number 2 is aviation. And for me, that began in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, Chippewa Valley Regional Airport with Gibson Aviation. And you heard earlier, Gerald Gibson was my first aviation boss. And I'm so proud that Daryl Jr. is here to represent the Gibson family. Please extend my thanks to the entire Gibson Aviation family, and it was a family affair. And there's several alumni of that era in the 70s and 80s, and I can see them. There's John, myself, John, and Ron, all were flyers or worked at the airport during that time, and so it was a very, very special time. But it, for me, formed the aviation roots and foundation, which led to the career that you just saw. Speaking of which, when I began flying, and that was in 1975, hard to believe, 49 years ago, and my flight instructor is here. Jerry, would you raise your hand? Mr. Jerry LeBaron. Class of 2018, I might mention. And Jerry was, and like most good instructors, Jerry left quite an impression for me. And one of which I would highlight is not just passion. I think most of this people in this room have a passion for aviation. But what he did is modeled for me what a guided passion is, or a professional passion. Passion means you're working towards something, okay? And I saw what he was working towards, and it kind of gave me this goal mindset. So it's not just enough to take a flying lesson, but how am I going to apply that? So Jerry, I thank you for that. The other thing that Jerry did for me to form a foundation for my aviation career was respect. And in this business, you have to respect what we're doing. And it doesn't matter if you're flying professionally or recreationally, you know, it's a three-dimensional sport. And you have to make sure you respect what you're doing. That means you put the time and effort in to do it right. So Jerry, I credit you with starting my aviation foundation, leading to what you saw. And I thank you so much for that. You pretty well saw most of my Air Force career, so I don't really need to go over that. But here representing my Air Force family is Corey Cornum. Corey was my flight surgeon, and like a good flight surgeon or AME does, they keep you flying. They don't prevent you from flying. And so Corey, flight surgeon, orthopedic surgeon, but you know what Corey is to me? Corey's a flyer. All right, that's how I know him. He's a flyer. I had the chance to go out and fly in his Carbon Cub tailwheel airplane out in Colorado recently, and just had a blast. It reminded me of the time John Wolf and I would fly his Cessna 140 around in this state before I even entered the Air Force, and or brought a Super Cub back from the factory in Lock Haven, Pennsylvania. Darrell Gibson Sr. allowed me to do that, and those memories are just so special. So again, Wisconsin and aviation to that Air Force career. Corey, I'm honored that you're here. Let me shift to my American Airlines career for a moment. You saw the tail end of it, the water cannon salute, which was very special. But I do want to emphasize not just the military-friendly policy that American Airlines has. In my view, American, not to talk ill of anyone else, but in my view, American Airlines is a leader both in aviation safety as well as training. And so I asked Captain Tom Egbert and his wife to show up tonight to please, Amy, I want to convey my gratitude for the 32 years I had, and please take that both above and below, especially the flight admin office, the support that they gave me to be part of a culture that was that way. The aviation safety so aligns with how I believe things. Also, I'm joined by fellow Czech pilots. I see Eric Roth, Jim Flynn, and Steve Katarinas are here. I was very fortunate my last 5 years at American to work in the training department, and I mentioned the focus that American Airlines has on training. Not only that, but we were able, if you haven't seen, there's a huge turnover currently in airline aviation. 15,000 pilots roughly at American Airlines, and we're turning over half of them in less than 7 years. And so that's a huge responsibility, but also a huge joy. And I was able to work with these fine gentlemen. They're here today, particularly Steve Katarinas, who is our leader, and oh, by the way, a fellow Wisconsinite. So Steve, thank you for your leadership and mentorship. You're a great friend as well, so thank you so much. Shifting gears for foundations, of course, there's family. I'm joined by my older brother and best friend, as well as my biggest aviation cheerleader, Larry. Thank you so much for being here tonight, as well as Michelle, my wife. You saw the acknowledgement there. If I may, Michelle and I share a similar faith. That is, if God's given you certain opportunities and abilities, then you really need to act on it. That's why you're here. And so hers was education, special ed specifically, and mine was aviation. And so we were aligned that way, but the simple fact is I would not have had the career I did without your support. So I share this recognition with you, Michelle. Thank you so much. Lastly, let me bring this home with Wisconsin and aviation. I was a 21-year-old kid leaving this state to join the Air Force. I had absolutely no idea what I was getting into, and I mean no idea. Well, at Gibson Aviation, we had a charter pilot by the name of Dan Dowdy, and he was a retired colonel, 24 years in the Air Force. So I approached Dan one day and I said, hey, I'm about to join the Air Force. Can you give me a, what can I expect? Give me some pointers. Give me the gouge. That's what all pilots want, right? And he looked at me. He was a pretty soft-spoken, quiet guy, but he looked at me and he said, don't let the little stuff bug you. And he kind of looked and little wry smile and then walked away. And I was like, that's it? Don't let the little stuff bug you? And I thought about that, but as I reflected on this more and more, he wasn't giving me advice to survive basic training or pilot training. Those are quite scripted, and they just play out the way they do. What he was giving me was career advice, all right? There's big stuff and little stuff. Big stuff is flying for the Air Force or supporting missions in the Air Force that defend a nation or promote peace throughout the world. Big stuff is flying safely to and from a destination with 180 people on board, or training the next generation pilots. That's big stuff. All the little stuff that gets in the way, it's just little stuff. And I had many times throughout my career, in both careers actually, where I would have maybe a crummy day or a bad day or something that was irritating me, but I would reflect on that. And what brought that home was that my worst day ever at American Airlines or the Air Force was still better than the best day Colonel Dan Dowdy had as a 7.5-year POW in Vietnam. Think about that. So that was the best advice anyone ever gave me, is to keep the big stuff in mind and the perspective. And I bring this all the way home to the foundation, is how grateful I am to be from this state, to give me the values and perspectives coming from Wisconsin and my roots in aviation that I had from Gibson Aviation. It is indeed an honor for me, 44 years after I left the state, to come back in this setting, to be honored in this way. I'm so grateful. Thank you all.
When it first showed up in 1977, the MiG-29, like its very distant ancestor, the MiG-15, was a startling revelation. The Soviets were catching up with the U.S. aeronautical technology. The U.S. intelligence community first learned of the new Soviet aircraft from satellite photos in November 1977, about the time of the jet's first flight. Simply by looking at the size and the shape of it, it was clear that the Soviets were developing a counterpart to our F-16 and F-18.
The MiG-29 Fulcrum is a fourth-generation jet fighter aircraft designed in the Soviet Union. Developed by the McDonnell Design Bureau as an air superiority fighter during the 1970s, the MiG-29 entered service with the Soviet Air Force in 1983. While originally oriented towards combat against any enemy aircraft, many MiG-29s have been furnished as multi-role fighters capable of performing a number of different operations, and are commonly outfitted to use a range of air-to-surface armaments and precision munitions. The MiG-29 has been manufactured in several major variants. The most advanced member of the family to date is the McDonnell MiG-35. Later models frequently featured improved engines, modern radar, considerably increased fuel capacity, and some aircraft have also been equipped for aerial refueling.
На МиГ-29 мне посчастливилось начать летать еще когда я был военным летчиком.
I was lucky to start flying the MiG-29 as an Air Force pilot. Since retraining in 1984 as a military pilot, covering all aspects of combat missions, I now fly as a test pilot, testing new types of equipment and weapons, aiming systems, modifications, prototypes including updates of the basic MiG-29. Now having flown many foreign fighters and having gained a lot of experience on these aircraft, I feel I can now draw comparisons. The MiG-29 is an incredible aircraft for two main reasons. It has very high maneuvering performance and thrust-to-weight ratio, complemented by very simple controls and a well-designed cockpit that is easy to understand. There are a few shortcomings with the aircraft, such as the not very high fuel capacity in the internal tanks. But this is a minor thing. One should not consider comparisons. but to look at the tasks as set out for the MiG-29. The purpose of the MiG-29 is to gain air superiority in close combat and fulfilling attack missions in frontline areas. This is its purpose, and due to its merits, the MiG-29, in my opinion, is an outstanding aircraft.
John Farley, OBE, was the first Western test pilot to fly the MiG-29 Fulcrum when it arrived at Farnborough, England in 1990. He recalls this historic flight.
Farley had got a series of manoeuvres that he particularly wanted me to do. These were ones which were going to show the airplane in its best possible light from the point of view of low-speed manoeuvrability, the things that he knew we couldn't do with our airplanes. They were largely matters of pulling the nose up, climbing to very low speeds, and then immediately rolling the airplane, pulling hard through, a fighting turn reversal, which you would use in combat, but done from attitudes and speeds that he knew that I knew our airplanes would not do. And this didn't surprise me in the least, because with my background, it was quite clear to me that an aircraft that could be flown to 45, 47 alpha and full backstick and so on, and an airplane that could fly the way I had watched it fly, it was clearly going to be able to do these manoeuvres. But nevertheless, to actually get in it and do it is still pretty impressive stuff. He said, we'll do some low-speed manoeuvring, he said, down to 0 knots. And he said, Valeri, fly. And he just goes the throttle, pull the nose up. We got the nose up to about 70 degrees. We just waited. The speed dropped right off the clock. The airplane slides backwards. And now you've got the recovery. The only trick with the recovery was that you had to lead with the right-hand throttle. Because you've got these two jet engines, which both go around the same way. Gyroscopic couples are there. And when this thing pitches violently nose down, as it will do, as soon as you pull a step back and get the air under the elevator, when it pitches violently nose down, you know that gyroscopic couples work 90 degrees out of the plane of rotation you would expect, so it makes the nose yaw. It makes the nose yaw off to the right because it is pitching vertically. And so you were supposed to lead with the right-hand throttle, because there's no speed on this thing at the moment, so it's not going to fill in with the right hand. Lead with the right-hand throttle just to stop the nose slashing on. Well, the first one, he had used this term lead with the throttle in the briefing. And so I just sort of tentatively sort of led with it. And when the nose fell through, it yawed off slightly to the right. Valeri fly. So Valeri did one. And I just sat there, and I can see it now as if it was 2 minutes ago. This thing steers right up in the sky, and it started to slide back, and I was just looking at the throttles out of the corner of my eye, And the right-hand one went all the way forward into full reheat, and then the left-hand one went all the way forward into full reheat, And that's what he meant by lead with the left throttle, push it all the way. They had achieved extremely benign handling at edges of what we call the envelope, that part of the speed, height, attitude, angle of attack combinations you can take an airplane to. They had achieved wonders compared to the sort of aircraft that we had in service at the time.
While originally oriented towards combat against enemy aircraft, many MiG-29s have been furnished as multi-role fighters capable of performing a number of different operations, and are commonly outfitted to use a range of air-to-surface armaments and precision munitions. MiG-29 has been manufactured in several major variants. The most advanced member of the family to date is the McDonnell MiG-35. Later models frequently featured improved engines, modern radar, considerably increased fuel capacity, and some aircraft have also been equipped for aerial refueling. Following the dissolution of the Soviet Union, a number of states have continued to operate the MiG-29, the largest of which is the Russian Air Force. The Russian Air Force wanted to upgrade its existing fleet to a modernized configuration, but financial difficulties have limited deliveries. The MiG-29 has also been a popular export aircraft. Over 30 individual nations either operate or have previously operated the aircraft to date, India being one of the largest export operators of the type. The MiG-29 leaves out an historic bypass of MiGs past and present during the International Aviation and Space Salon at Tchaikovsky. 5 MiG aircraft took part in the flypast, including the 21 Fishbed, 23 Slugger, 25 Foxbat, 29 Fulcrum, and 31 Boxheim.
The Russian MiG-29 Fulcrum fighters were flying aerobatics at the International Air Tattoo at RAF Fairford, claimed to be the world's largest military aviation display. The MiGs, Russia's most advanced fighter, were at about 1,000 feet, performing a series of crossover maneuvers. These pictures, shot by a BBC team covering the display, show the plane coming in horizontally from the left, apparently clipping the wing of the other aircraft with its fuselage. The result was devastating and spectacular. Despite the instant inferno, there was only one minor scorching injury on the ground. Both pilots ejected immediately. One drifted to earth with a life raft still attached. One pilot suffered spinal injury, the other was only slightly hurt. Some amateur videos, slowed down, showed the catastrophic effect of what looked like a momentary loss of concentration by one of the pilots. And in another sequence shot by the BBC, both pilots have safely ejected 2 to 3 seconds after impact. Emergency teams rushed to douse fireballs fueled by the crashes. One within the airbase perimeter damaged a Hercules on the ground. The other came down in fields near a caravan site. The aircrew, said to be among Russia's best test pilots, were extraordinarily lucky. Both walked away. One, dazed, awaited help. The other, also a little shaken, looked for something to steady his nerves.
Вопрос, конечно, он сложный по объему.
To give a concrete answer on what happened at Fairford is difficult. One can speak for far too long about the subjective and objective factors which led to the accident. There are several reasons connected with the organization of the flight and the meteorological factors on the day. On top of this, there were mistakes of ours made during the flight. I'm just happy that we remained alive and that nobody was hurt on the ground. This is the most important factor. They say that every cloud has a silver lining, and we've gained experience from this incident, although at a very high cost, a bitter cost. Nothing can be done about it, it's life. My first feeling as my feet touched the ground was that of disappointment. We wanted to demonstrate the aircraft at its best. The demonstration program we prepared was both challenging and spectacular. It was initially received very well in the Czech Republic. After the crash, I was very nervous, because I did not know what had happened to Alexander, and I started looking for him, although we had landed in different places. I saw him in the hospital and was relieved to see that he was all right. I recollect the accident with feelings of disappointment.
Причин много было этого происшествия. Комиссия разбиралась. Были недостатки в организации полета. Я коснусь тех ошибок, отклонений.
There were many reasons for the MiG crash at Fairford in which I was involved. A special commission was set up to carry out an investigation into the accident. Looking back, there were certainly drawbacks in the flight organization. Both aircraft deviated too much when performing 2 successive loops, which was not ideal. We also miscalculated when preparing for this flight, not allowing for variance in the event of a recovery situation. Not having these variants resulted in us not being able to avoid colliding with each other after our initial separation. That is how I see the accident from my point of view. I think the seat was designed well for an ejection from that low altitude. The cockpit was destroyed, but it did not result in the failure of the ejection seat system. I give thanks to the designer of this seat. At the time I did not know what had happened to Sergei, or where the aircraft had fallen, or even if there was damage on the ground, and God forbid if anyone had been killed. I felt huge disappointment, because the accident had happened during a demonstration flight at the show.
The Soviet Union's newest aircraft carrier, Tbilisi, sails across the waters of the Black Sea as host to a series of takeoff and deck landing tests with MiG-29K, flown by McDonnell test pilot Takhtar al-Bakirov.
Минутка. Давай. Не руки. Скажите что-нибудь, ага, вот так. Говорит.
Test pilot Abakirov is concerned that there seems to be a communication problem between the MiG and the aircraft carrier with regard to the deck landing.
Ой, потом перехожу, мне ничего не говорят. Я уже на корабль 2 перешел, на корабль 1. На корабль 1. У меня хоть появился МСК догорел. А вот, догорел? Да, на корабле 1. Ну, а данных не выдает. А? Я ничего не знаю, я на борту.
McDonnell Chief Test Pilot Roman Taskayev played a vital role in the development of MiG-29 during the flight test program. Taskayev and Anatoly Kvorchov were responsible for the first appearance of the MiG in the West when they arrived at Farnborough in 1988, both demonstrating the capabilities of the aircraft. Display flights by Roman Taskayev at Zhukovsky in Berlin, seen here, confirmed that the MiG-29 was certainly capable of performing maneuvers that its rival, the F-16.
Нормально. Уже шпаку вымотает. Нет, нет. Течь как-то лучше. Он их облетывал.
Every flying display is complex, and a pilot must fix all the maneuvers he's to make firmly in his mind. One way is by walking through, something the onlooker may find rather puzzling. Gromov Flight Research Institute test pilot Alexander Gunayev performs this routine before each flight, in this case a display in the MiG-29.
Кто такой комплект? Ты залетай, идет,
Экран. Показать на свой стоит. Выполняйте право, поставите, посмотрим.
Выполняю право подходит на 12. Контроль пошел, норм. Я со мной, подруга. Вам понятно. Норма.
Опять к себе оценка, конец связи. Еще раз на один вылет рассчитываем.
Если поторопишься, то опять будет тут.
Понял.
Архив закрыл, Килган. Нормально, облак сидит. Будет ук. Фу, нормально, заходим, фиксируем.
Осталось 550 килограмм. Осталось 504 килограммов.
Отвечает? Запускайте 746 давление. 746 принял, спасибо, запускаем. Будет тройная. Находим на гараж с бочками.
Осталось 550 килограммов.
Все, а тут нет, быстрее.
Смотри экран.
Всем 69, все лучше, с проходом. Разрешил проход. Десятый еще повторять будешь? Да, то же самое. Учти, на фиксированной и на многократной в конце снижения значительный. Хорошо, значит я их повторю.
Смотри экран.
Вербанок 421. Разрешите вывести на полосу. Понял, разрешили. Начинаю искать джедов, вторых 769. А, 421 полос, владелец. Да, более фиксировано. Лучше. knots.
Осталось 550 килограмм.
Здесь значительный напор. Жду. Что?
Осталось 550 килограмм. Осталось 550 килограмм. Смотри экран.
Ш-69, все общено. Посадка готов.
769, посадка 32, разрешаю, ветер 310 градусов, 6 метров.
Понял.
Понял.